and welcome once again to the Renewable Roundup podcast from Schneider Electric. I'm Russell Redding, Head of Energy Markets at Zygo. Every week I'm going to bring you top stories, critical climate topics and insights, so please do hit subscribe so you don't miss a thing. This week I'm excited to be joined by Zander Dale of Schneider Electric Advisory Services. He's going to talk to me about insetting. What is insetting? Why does it matter? Have a listen and find out. Hi everyone, this week I'm joined by Zander Dale. Zander, how are you today?
I'm very good, Russell. How are you doing?
I'm awesome, yeah, I'm excited. And the reason I'm excited is because I know you can help me with something.
I hope so.
So I've been hearing a lot about something called insetting. Now, I thought I knew what offsetting was, but I'm beginning to understand, I think, that insetting is about emissions reductions within your supply chain. So if you wouldn't mind, do you want to give a quick intro to who you are and what you do, and then maybe just sort of talk about why insetting is a thing that matters now?
Sure. So hello. My name is Zander Dale. So I'm a managing consultant here at SE Advisory Services. I've got over a decade of experience in the industry, and I started out within forestry, biodiversity, and the UK biofuel market. Since that, I've been with the company for 5 years now, and I'm the offsetting advisory global family lead. So I oversee our service line, push things forward, help delivery. That covers offsetting strategies, project development, project due diligence, making sure projects are good, bad, credible, and all the rest. But most importantly for today, I've been monitoring closely and developing our offer around insetting and how we can take the knowledge from our offsetting project development strategies and due diligence and put that into projects within the value chain. And I think one of the main things I want to kind of get across today is that insetting is not just a rebranded version of offsetting. It is a much more kind of practical approach to reducing and removing carbon within your value chain. So it's very much focusing on the value chain and supply chain. And if that is done well, it can help deliver reductions and removals against your Scope 3 targets, but also support the wider nature, biodiversity, social, and supply chain resilience side of things. So it is taking those learnings from beyond the value chain and then linking it within your value chain. And I think if we look at today's market and what organizations are looking on, we've been focused on operational emissions. I think Scope 1, the operational aspects, organizations should know what they're doing there now. Schneider Electric has helped a lot of people with their Scope 2 emissions, so that is kind of a much more known quantity. Value chains are big and unwieldy. A lot of organizations don't know necessarily where they're sourcing from, what they're sourcing, how they're sourcing it, etc. So they're a lot more complex. If you take the forest, land, and agricultural supply chain, for example, when you're sourcing oats or coffee, you're going to be sourcing, there's going to be farmers, there's going to be suppliers, there's going to be processors, there's the logistics providers, the ones driving it around. Then the other side, if you produce that, you've got someone who's going to be using your product, and then you've got whoever's kind of dealing with the end of life as well. All of that is out of your direct control, but you are still the cause of it happening. So how do you link up that discussion? How do you get data from that? How do you pass it through? So it's kind of the term insetting. It helps join up that thinking, and it kind of takes the strategy, the supplier engagement, and actually turn it into kind of practical interventions within your value chain to actually put that into practice, remove carbon, do that credibly, provide your evidence, and push it back up.
Okay, that's really interesting. So essentially it's different because it's actually looking at what's going on in that kind of value chain. It's not just saying, oh, I'm considering what I'm doing and what I'm using, saying like scope 1 and scope 2. It's actually looking at what's in the value chain. And to be fair, we see that in the sort of energy world and the PPA world, where people are thinking more about, if I'm going to do a PPA, can I bring some of my suppliers along with me on that journey, or even my customers? And I've seen organisations in the UK who have, expanded the size of their PPA, and some have just gone, look, I'm going to do it. You can take some and just join in. And others have said, what about a cohort? Why don't we get together and we can lead because we're doing it, but you can jump on, and then I'm doing so. And I guess it's hard because there's probably a lot going on, and I'm just talking about a simple thing. I'm talking about energy, and you're talking about all sorts of things. So I'm guessing there's going to be suppliers, there'll be farmers, and there's logistics, and people who process stuff. And it's going to be it's going to be, I guess, quite complicated to work out where everything is, and to try and do that. If it's not too much of a question, you've kind of given me a sort of high level, I think, of what insetting is. Is it worth diving into the kind of the detail a bit about what insetting is, and maybe thinking about things like what's an insetting program and things like that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think so. As I said at the top, insetting is still an ill-defined term. We've seen it in the science-based target literature. It is in there. You've got organizations kind of coming out. The GHG protocol kind of reference those value chain interventions and insetting. You've got new frameworks coming out from the Value Change Initiative. You've got Sustain Cert, who are a verification body who are trying to kind of verify it. And they all largely define insetting as investing in emissions reductions or removals within or directly connected to a company's own value chain. And I think that just to kind of zoom in on that, the main focus there is value chain, and that is the defining feature. But that is also the greyest aspect of this, because where is your value chain? How do you define what is in, and how do you define what is out? And I'll let you choose how deep you want me to go in on that today. But there are a lot of things. Is it the ground that you are growing that coffee bean? Is it the factory you're sourcing that steel? Is it the region? Is it a group of factories? Is it a country level? That is all part of these kind of frameworks that is coming out. And as you said, energy is energy. What we're dealing here with is a massive different commodities. We've got, you can have coffee, you can have steel, you can have HVO fuel, you can have energy. The kind of framework of insetting largely is the same, but I think we see regenerative agriculture and agroforestry as two kind of main sides, and what is insetting practically. And I think it's largely come from the kind of more land sector side of things. It's come from those who are engaged with the land, but then is expanding out to wider, more industrial supply chains as well. So we're seeing like supplier energy efficiency, which is the PPAs that you've been talking about. But then you're seeing kind of low carbon processing. Steel, can you reduce the carbon that goes into creating steel? And then you can create that product carbon footprint, and then you can pass that data up. That is a form of insetting, depending on where the finance is coming from. If you're funding that within your value chain and sourcing it, that is insetting. And I think that's one of the kind of key things as well. Insetting can be reductions, but it can also be enhanced removals associated with your value chain. And one of my favorite kind of phrases at the moment is that we play within the guardrails of the frameworks we are provided. So I'm saying all of this. This can be reduction, this can be removals, this can be everything else. But it depends, one, how you're accounting for these actions. Two, what your targets are. Three, what evidence you have, and then how you want to report it. So there are different ways of doing it, but that doesn't mean that an insetting project will help you meet your targets. It depends what targets you have, what frameworks you report against, and how you go through it. But it can reduce and remove carbon. I think the other thing, and kind of linking with offsetting as well, and you see this a lot in the voluntary carbon market around offsetting, is that it's not just about the carbon. Actually, it's linking up with that wider co-benefits. And you see that a lot with insetting as well. Because if you are engaging in your value chain, you can, and you're kind of say you're putting biochar into your soil in your crop areas, that biochar, you can reduce fertilizer inputs. You can kind of reduce emissions elsewhere. You can increase nutrients in the soil. You can increase the water retention within the soil. You can also like create a local market and help with the local kind of community engagement. You can build your supplier resilience and engagement as well. So there's just all these different aspects that you can kind of tick off. But let's take it back to what a program or a project looks like. What is your intervention? What are you doing? Where is it taking place? Is it in your value chain? Is it in your factory? Is it somewhere else? How is it linked to your value chain? And can you prove that? How are you quantifying those reductions or removals? What methodology are you following? And then I think one really, really important thing is who has the right to report or claim it? And that is a very murky area, which, there's a lot more clarity coming out around it. Ultimately, you need contracts, and you need to discuss and engage. You can't just do something and say we're great. You need to engage with those people, those organizations, that value chain, and agree what is going to be communicated by who, when.
That's really interesting. I think, if I'm right, it sounds like the crucial bit here is around the value chain, and can you prove that it's in your value chain? And if you can, and you can measure it, and then you can say, right, I can therefore I show it's in my value chain, I can measure it. It's mine. It's almost like it's mine to claim and therefore report. Then basically that's insetting. And there can be, from what I'm hearing, a whole raft of things that you could do. It's not as simple as in the energy world saying basically I just need to prove I bought carbon-free energy. There's a whole raft of things that you need to look at, work out, because there are things you mentioned then that I never even imagined that people would be able to consider. And I think that's great, because actually it does sound like it builds a whole sort of sustainable eco-structure. But is that kind of fair? It's like, yeah, it's in my value chain. I can measure it. It's mine to report. It's pretty much good.
Yeah. I mean, in the short of it, I would say that's a pretty good summary.
I know I'm massively simplifying, Zander. Sorry.
I need someone to make it a little bit more, more palatable than what I'm saying.
No, not at all. It's actually surprising. Well, I say that's awful, isn't it? Surprisingly complex area. It is a really complex area, and I'm glad I've got an expert like you to talk about it, because I'm learning loads about this, because there's a lot of stuff. So if I can ask, I've heard about things like forest, land, and agriculture removals. Like sort of soil carbon and things like restoration and things like that. Is insetting that, or is it different? How does it maybe compare to some of the other, some of the other concepts?
It's I think this is one of the biggest areas that confuses people, because insetting or value chain interventions, it is an umbrella term. It incorporates basically actions within your value chain, and that can be forest, land, and agricultural removals. That can be energy efficiency projects. That can be supplier engagement and the passing of product carbon footprints and emission factors through it. It is all under the same umbrella, and kind of mixes in with a lot of other wider project types out there. But insetting is that climate action within your value chain, and can largely support you reducing and removing your scope 3 emissions. Now, forest, land, and agricultural removals, I think that was one of the key bits that actually kicked this whole thing off. So in 2022, the SBTi released their forest, land, and agricultural guidance for setting targets associated with the land. The GHG protocol released their GHG protocol land sector removal guidance draft, which has now been turned into a standard in 2026. And within that kind of guidance, the GHG protocol basically said, this is how you account for emissions. This is a global standard for accounting emissions associated with land, taking what the IPCC says and others, putting it in this, something that organizations can actually do. The SBTI realized that if you're setting targets with the land, you can't reduce those emissions by 90%. Cows, ruminants, they release methane. You can reduce that methane, but you cannot stop them emitting it. There is just no way. Rice paddies, again, the methane is coming out. You cannot stop that. What they have, removals are an incredibly important part of the land, trees growing, grass growing, crops growing, all the rest. And so they allowed for removals to be accounted against those target reductions for the first time. There are a lot of guardrails, as I said earlier, playing within the guardrails of the frameworks we've provided, and that is one of the key ones. And so flag removals are land sector removals in your own operations or the land you source from, such as soil carbon, agroforestry, or forest planting, or biochar. But they must be reported and aligned with that wider guidance. They can only be accounted for against your SBTI flag targets and only be net off against your forest, land and agricultural emissions. So that kind of opened up the idea of engaging with your value chain, accounting for removals, and actually including that within your target. So ultimately, flag removals are a type of insetting, and so it is a subset underneath. If you look kind of wider at just to lean on offsetting as well, and how that kind of brings in offsetting is basically reductions or removal projects outside of your value chain. You are paying someone else to remove carbon by planting a forest, to distribute cook stoves, to reduce deforestation and avoid carbon going into the atmosphere, or someone to directly capture carbon from the air, but it is not to do with your value chain. You are doing this for carbon neutrality goals. It cannot be claimed against your targets, not be claimed against the GHG inventory. It is a wider thing. So, insetting value chains, there are subsets of things underneath it, offsetting outside your value chain. Just to give you an example, beyond value chain mitigation, throwing another buzzword in there, that is a form of offsetting, but basically something you don't claim. You're just saying you're going to do this nice thing for the world, and it's really good. You planted this forest, you've removed carbon, but you're not claiming against your emissions. You're just contributing to global net zero. So again, that is a subset of offsetting, like flag removals are a subset of insetting.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So thanks for explaining the differences. I think the thing that leaps out to me there is I can see why insetting, as in working in your own value chain, might seem attractive, because if I was a corporate, well, it's probably reportable, but that aside, if you think about my customers, if I'm talking about how I am decarbonizing my whole product life cycle and chain, whether it's I'm using less water to make my jeans, or the transportation has been electrified, there'll be elements of that which are local. There might be some in countries where the work is done. It might be in Vietnam or India or whatever, or in America, but it all sort of fits together into your end product, and you can pick that up and say, look, there it is. Whereas I think if I said, oh well, we have planted a whole bunch of trees in Mongolia because there's been a deforestation issue, and that's great because it actually reduces flooding. We've given people cook stoves in Africa, which not only reduce carbon but increase health outcomes. They're all great, but I think you can see people thinking, how does that relate to my genes? That you made. It doesn't. So I could kind of see that, off the kind of insetting versus maybe offsetting and beyond value chain, which I think is great. It's almost quite philanthropic, isn't it? We've just planted a forest over there because we can. But I can see why insetting is more relevant and would be interesting. So having said that, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I think the kind of the one thing I just want to kind of caveat is that, because I completely agree, and a lot of the client conversations I have, it's much easier to say, hey, invest in this project because it's going to hit your bottom line. It's going to help you source things cheaper. It's going to help you adapt to climate change. It's going to, increase supplier resilience, etc. Offsetting still has a very important place, and is going to be required for those, residual emissions and kind of dealing with those residual and ongoing emissions kind of as you go forward. So, they're not an if or, it's a both and.
Okay. That makes sense. And is that credibility that I mentioned, to kind of move it on a little bit, is that why Insetting's moving up the agenda? Or do you think, is it fair to say, actually, no, there are other drivers that are making corporates look hard at this?
I think, well, there's a lot of different things which are kind of pushing it up the agenda. The last few years, we've seen people, as I said, kind of move from, they've kind of get understanding their scope 1 and 2. We're seeing those kind of footprints. They're kind of moving to data collection kind of platforms, and they've got that under control largely. Scope 3 delivery pressure is still a massive thing, and I don't think that any or many organizations have kind of directly been able to do that meaningfully. Don't get me wrong, I am very aware of some clients who are going to meet and beat their near-term targets because of their scope 3 action, but they were doing this early. But a lot of companies have made targets, they're struggling to hit them. If I can be honest, I've been in conversations where people have set targets and I've said, how are you going to hit them? They say they don't know. But they have to set them. And we're like, right, I think you need a carbon action plan and a transition plan and all the rest. There is a big push towards engaging with suppliers. And, from a footprinting point of view, actually understanding what your scope 3 is actually can reduce your emissions that you're dealing with massively anyway. If you're dealing with scope 3 spend data, and you don't know what you're doing, you just know how much you paid into your scope 3, you don't have a full picture of what you're actually dealing with. So we're seeing supply engagement push it forward, but it's not just about kind of engaging suppliers, it's actually kind of pushing that and actually actioning that and being able to kind of push that data through. I think that is coupled by the developing frameworks that are out there. So I mentioned the SBTI flag guidance, the GHG protocol land sector removals guidance, instrumental and really, really important within the land sector that is opened up this new area to be able to work. I think we're seeing kind of wider, the SBTI Net Zero 2.0 at the time of recording is kind of due to come out, but it is kind of the draft consultations have all focused on value chains. Engage with your scope 3, drive change, pass data through. For example, in the offsetting space, it says about neutralizing your scope 1 emissions, but you need to work with your scope 3 to help them to neutralize their emissions as well. The whole conversation is about driving that data change, that data pass through to be able to deal with that and know what is happening. We're seeing that in the compliance market as well. We're also seeing, EUDR, for example, is coming out within the EU, is the deforestation regulations. That is basically asking people to, what are you sourcing? Where are you sourcing it from? You need to pass that data through and make sure it's deforestation free. And I think that links to my final point where actually, yes, we're dealing with carbon. We've been dealing with carbon since the 90s. Now, the linked up and joint up conversation across value chains and operations is climate, nature, and resilience. And so that joined up conversation, and as I said earlier, Insetting is not just about reducing and removing carbon, it's about engaging local communities, engaging your suppliers, engaging factories, reducing physical risk within your supply chain, dealing with soil degradation, focusing on areas with water stress. Can you plant a load of forest or trees around a field is kind of, in a water stress area, for example, that can help mitigate your biodiversity loss. It can help kind of increase your yield stability, and it can impact kind of farmer vulnerability, for example. I think the coffee industry is a really, really good example of that. They realized that if we hit, if we warm too much, they're going to lose about 50% of the area which can grow coffee. So they need to do this. They need to work out the carbon emissions. They need to reduce them. They need to work with the farmers. They need to sort out the soil. They need to help the farmers be there for longer, sort out the water, and adapt and be resilient to any changes coming forward. And ultimately, if you put those two things together, that is what insetting is.
Fabulous. That's really interesting. Thanks for that. I think it kind of makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to say I've been learning. I'm conscious that we kind of covered a lot at quite a high level, and I know you kind of agreed to come back and do another podcast with me later on, and maybe dive into some of the depths. So what I'm going to do is to say, first of all, thanks for joining me this week. It's been super to learn about insetting, and it's super to talk to someone who's really passionate about the what they do and the kind of environment. So hopefully you'll agree to come back
I would love
shortly, and we'll have a dive into. Okay, we'll do that. So Zander, thank you very much for having a chat with me this week, and I look forward to speaking to you again with a bit more depth.
Thank you very much, Russell. It's a pleasure to be here.